it's perfectly possible that larger institutions who do not want to admit that they have made a mistake and just holding ether for way too freaking long are trying to make the same call, because nobody likes to admit that they were wrong, and nobody likes to, just cut violently with a past decision.
It's also worth noting that, like, if you're talking about institutional demand and them moving prices, institutions FOMO just like retail. It's just like FOMO in a different way.
Yeah. This is what I mean by being pessimistic about the rationality of institutions. And here we go again. Welcome to the Spelunking podcast. We have not prepared, but I think we're going to talk about markets. Maybe we've had many rants in our Signal group, but
let's see if we haven't exhausted the topic on the ranting. The ranting side.
Yeah,
I honestly we'll see in preparation than we have done very often.
And actually, for context, given this is markets, we're January 23rd, which is shockingly a week after we recorded the last one, which is going up today. Like we're actually getting on a proper schedule here, even if 2 points don't make a line.
Yeah. Though the funniest thing in the Signal group was Mika mentioning how much she likes the Foundation series.
Yes.
And I was just like, oh no, oh no.
I mean, books we could still defend, but I understand why I couldn't defend really the television. But I have a tolerance for kind of slightly stupid sci-fi, which is kind of high, I think.
That's not slightly stupid.
It's retarded.
Yeah.
That is like banking on Trump's meme coin stupid. It's like that.
Yeah, though I did enjoy it, because the moment you said that, I was like, okay, Ricardo is going to come in here and rant. And then I don't check my phone for a little while, and I come back and there's just 30 messages all from I'm like, yeah.
Dude, and it's kind of like stupidity pinball, because one stupid thing on the series remind me of the next stupid thing. It's like, anyway, let's not go there.
It's not great. Anyways, markets have been interesting. Obviously, we're recording this like a couple days / a week after the Trump meme coin launched, and then soon after the MELANIA meme coin launched. And market reaction has been interesting. Maybe does one of you want to kind of give your take on what happened and what should happen now, or what you would expect to happen now, and then we can start unraveling it from there?
What happened from what point of view? I mean, I'm sure that anybody who's listening to this is aware of what happened in the space per se, right? You got 2 rapid fire meme coin launches on Solana. I think, was it Friday night in Europe, I think, or early days of Saturday that Trump launched, and then right after it, they expected people to rotate into MELANIA, which originally seemed to have been a hack, and then Trump's official account actually retweeted it. So apparently both things were real. I mean, it's a meme coin grift, right? So what had happened is that it sucked a lot of liquidity out of any other meme coin, because people were stockpiling it as much as possible. I do think it generated the MELANIA generated a lot of ill will, even on people who were not initially that mad about the Trump launch, because it's so clearly a grift, right? Even people who I would have expected to know the kind of grifter they were backing, like Ryan Selkis, but apparently he wasn't aware. All right, that's as best as I can summarize the whole thing. Oh, and both launched on Solana.
Yeah,
which managed to stay up.
They launched on Solana, although I couldn't get my transactions through for a little while there. But I think the important kind of thing here is that Trump launched a meme coin and it went to 70 billion FDV in a day or 2, which is kind of insane. So it's definitely the biggest, just launch that we've had in this cycle, right? And whether you think this is a good thing or not, like it means something, and so we should discuss that. But what's your read on the situation, Mika?
I mean, there's a couple of different riffs that one could have on this, so I'll just select a few and see if that takes us somewhere. But I guess the first one is that the MELANIA launch kind of, I think there's like an acceptable and I wouldn't say healthy, but good for the markets level in the short to mid term level of grift that is kind of acceptable. And we kind of, I think, passed that threshold a little bit with the MELANIA launch, and that kind of was reflected immediately in the market cap of Trump. Then it kind of went back up, and now it's kind of been grinding down a little bit, but still at 36 bill FDV. So that's kind of one dynamic where if you kind of want to optimize the grift as the Trump family, I think the strategy actually is the kind of most offensive part here in some sense, where you had such a successful thing going on and you really didn't need to touch that. You just needed to like kind of go with that forward. It may still be the case that kind of the Trump one is the big one and there's like a positive effect on it still. Like one shouldn't be too quick to dismiss that kind of scenario either, in a sense. But I think that's kind of the overall feeling in the market. What it implies, and maybe here's another riff, what it implies for the broader market in terms of, like sometimes these things go quite well. For example, Doge had a big run last cycle where it really kind of pushed the entire alt season to go, where it started first and then kind of liquidity moved from there to other things. And it was kind of a positive alt season feedback loop that you had from that. Whether or not that happens here is kind of quite different, because I do think the market is so much more like less naive about these things, that the profit taking tends to be into dollars and it doesn't like move into the market, I guess, in the same way it has in the two previous cycles where everything just had this like positive liquidity effect. Right now, like if you just look at like market participants and just how much you should ascribe to like sentiment on crypto Twitter, but people are a lot more kind of pessimistic, negative, or just have that mindset of oh yeah, the party will be over at some point, so I have to take profits, and the kind of liquidity doesn't move there. I mean, people just talk about like, are we in the 7th inning, the 8th inning, the 9th inning? So there's a lot of the inning talk in baseball terms. So yeah, I mean, those are a couple of basic things. I guess we can go kind of from there. Your reactions are.
Yeah, I mean,
I like that perspective of the acceptable amount of grift. There are expected levels, and this kind of like goes into what you said about people paying this too much and taking profits. There are acceptable levels in the sense that you expect the people running the grift to have at least a modicum of impulse control. Running one after the other showed fairly little impulse control, so why would you expect this to radically propagate into the rest of the market as well? I also wonder, and I'm curious on what you guys think about this, because they just came up when you mentioned Doge. It seems like the people getting into Doge and then going into the rest of the all season and creating an all season less cycle, which is a reminder this happened. This was kind of propelled when Musk tweeted about it and started kind of like adopting Doge, like like Chad puts up the shitcoin. The audience of that Musk had at the time seemed to be more focused on a tag following him because of the Mars thing or what have you, whereas the Trump audience seems to be much wider but also less tech oriented. So unclear if those people would think in terms of cycling their profits elsewhere instead of just taking dollars out. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general there's not been, like, or at least hasn't been as evident that like profits would be rotated into other assets. That to me smells like there's more kind of institutional buying of specific assets. And like Mika, I think, said in our group chat, The rotating into other assets is maybe slightly more degen kind of thing. There's not really sort of like a fundamental argument for why that should work. It just has worked. And so it has that perspective or that aspect. I mean, yeah, there has been some rotation. But I think, like, maybe just to take a step back. So I think what happened is that we got probably the biggest ad for crypto that has existed, you could argue, or at least the biggest ad in this cycle. And like I mentioned to you guys when this happened, you would expect this to get the ball rolling, right? Like I can't imagine what would be a bigger like ad for crypto and specifically Solana. And I think this week will be very telling on how things go. But at the same time, I have this kind of thesis that I think in this cycle, institutional investors, or just in general, many investors front ran or tried to front run the cycle. And I think they did it a bit too early and with too much capital. So kind of like what happened in the 2020, kind of 2021 timeframe, when the VCs were putting in hundreds of millions into private rounds, and then the public market valuations really didn't kind of like add up to what that should have been for them. You have a sort of similar thing happening where people trying to front run the cycle, and they're doing it in large size, and so they're pushing the prices up really high before there's really momentum for the bull round or for a bull market. And then that in itself kind of makes it a less interesting proposition for like retail investors. And then those, because they've been holding for quite a long time now, I think they're getting a little bit skittish, and they're kind of like trying to lower their risk profile here. And so then whenever you have a bump, even though you have this massive marketing campaign for crypto, the reaction to it is basically like, if prices go up 20%, we sell. Like very sort of hair trigger selling. And so my feeling is kind of, I don't have a good idea of what happens next, but I do feel like that segment of investors that kind of like pushed the market into this sort of half bull market very early, they need to kind of be shaken out, or they need to adjust their portfolio so that they're comfortable with the level of risk, and won't be an immediate seller whenever prices go up. And then things may happen. You would also assume that if that happens, kind of prices may be normalized to some point. And so that kind of makes sense to me. But then there's this other looming question of like, what else is going to push people into the markets? Yeah. And I really don't know. So it's possible we get an alt season, in sort of the traditional sense, where you just start to see kind of, I don't know, small projects like DeFi projects, whatever, all this stuff kind of pop. And that has all traditionally been like a time when people get kind of, that's been usually the time of peak frenzy because the percentage returns have been so high. But we'll see, because like if that institutional money was really just front running the market and they're a little bit more sort of sensitive to the asset they're putting their money into, that rotation may not happen because they're not being as degenerate as they used to be. So it's a tricky market to read. It's a tricky market to read, yeah. But like, how do you guys kind of react to that? Or do you agree with this general sentiment of like, maybe institutions front ran too early and with too much size?
I agree. And it's especially, I think, true for the crypto native people who sit on very large profits in like good cases if they've allocated correctly. One thing I want to add to that, which is just to put numbers on this kind of advertising campaign, which is that when the Trump coin launched on the second day, Phantom did as many transactions via their wallet as Base does in a day, which is a huge number if you think about how much of chain activity is kind of just like arbitrage bot market making volume.
They had more transactions a second than Google has queries.
And they did that on that's Phantom, the front end, right? It's the actual like wallet, like someone clicking thing. And the fact that they did those volumes, like someone got onboarded, quite obviously. Like there's something just happened, which is very, very big. And that's why, like you said, it's very interesting to see the kind of next couple of weeks here. And the next few weeks are crucial. I hate that thing. But like in this case, I think it is very interesting to see because like someone got onboarded in a very large size, specifically onto Solana and like specifically onto the Phantom wallet. And we'll kind of see what happens there. But I echo your sentiment, and it was kind of similar way I tried to say as well, which is that the current like market participant is like there's a lot of profit taking at these levels, and justifiably so. So what that leads to, like, what are the kind of effects? Where does it kind of tilt in the way where, okay, you should have taken profits faster, or does it tilt in the way where, okay, now you find this consolidation period and you actually do have somewhere kind of enough to kind of boost it to the next level? That's I think a question mark, and one where even like market participants can still make a difference. Because I mean, we talked about the Bitcoin strategic reserve, but like that kind of thing, or other sovereigns buying, and like this is the kind of message coming out of Bitwise is that we're having calls with all these like sovereign wealth funds and stuff like that. That's the kind of there is still like things there to make the next push, but it's still like it's a bit like in the air. It's unclear how do we find those things actually and how it plays itself out in the market.
I'm with you, fellas. I mean, basically something to keep in mind here that you said, Teemu, is that this was the biggest possible. That is true, but this Trump launching a meme coin is a very retail focused ad, right? It's say the strategic reserve would be an industry focused ad. This appeals to a particular class of people. And as I mentioned in the chat, I don't think that class of people is going to move price on even Solana. If that money is going to go anywhere, it's going to go over to the stuff where they're likely to be more attracted by the cost unit bias, basically, like the chiefs. But that's
So I kind of maybe agree with that. But so like what I would expect is that this was not only the biggest retail ad, but it also solidified Solana as the winner of this cycle.
Sure, but
and potentially the winner for quite a while. And so in my mind, if you're an institution holding like with significant L1 holdings elsewhere, you would rotate into Solana. Like if you don't have Solana exposure, you would get Solana exposure
immediately. That's what I don't expect. I wouldn't expect them to just dump ETH and buy Solana when they have been holding it to this massive underperformance that it has had for the last 18 months. I would expect them to start making that call, but I wouldn't expect them to panic buy.
I'm pessimistic about the rationality of institutions, regardless of how elaborate their processes are. But so we can debate the exact timeline. I'm not necessarily arguing that, but I like that would be kind of like a logical thing. You can look at sort of comparable benchmarks, ETH, XRP, like whatever. Solana DEX volume momentarily passed all other DEX volume in total, and all this stuff. So you would assume people would want to get on board, and then what seems to be happening is that it's kind of still trading in like the same ish range, and that might be because people front ran and like, you know, all this stuff. Like there might be a systemic kind of situation where people are just you know, risk off and whatnot, but you would still expect people to shift their portfolios a little bit. Like there's the chances that Ethereum goes 2x from here, I
Yeah.
think are like comparatively low compared to the chances that Solana does a 2x.
Generally, I agree. And I do think that there's a certain, not financial advice, but there's a certain value to just, you know, making a call and pulling the trigger because you don't know what's going to happen, right? Particularly when things are moving at a much faster clip than they had moved on previous cycles, right? But just as an example, I was talking to someone, not an institutional, but not retail either, somebody from the crypto space, not just on Solana, and somebody who would have deployed yesterday. And what they were saying was like, oh yeah, I should have rotated this thing into Solana a while back, and I didn't, and I think it's too expensive. But, you know, I said the same thing when it was back at 80. So what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to get in when it's at 200, which means that even someone who has seen how violently these things can move up is still expecting a 20% drop from here, right? It's perfectly possible that larger institutions who do not want to admit that they have made a mistake and just holding Ether for way too freaking long are trying to make the same call because nobody likes to admit that they were wrong. And nobody likes to, you know, just cut violently with a past decision. So, and I think that I guess that what I'm saying is that if there were institutions holding mostly Ether that feel the pain because of this, I would have expected them to feel the pain way earlier than this.
This is why I think like there's actually the market sentiment is actually like if you find that positive trigger, which pushes like, because like you said, Solana is the winner of the cycle, and it's quite clear. And if there is very, very positive developments in the industry in terms of attention, Solana will be at the middle of that attention. So I feel like this is actually a very interesting situation where, like the Ricardo's example, I think is a lot of buyers in the market, but those buyers kind of, when they are cynical, they expect better prices for themselves. And that's where like you can get into trouble. That's the thing, like about why the upside I think exists in this market is that the market isn't super exuberant relative to what it can be and what we've seen it in the past. And if that money is forced to chase, then you actually are in this kind of very positive feedback loop where, okay, like I didn't get my entry, I need to chase it now. And when that momentum shifts in your favor, that's like a very positive trigger that I think still exists for Solana. But it's kind of in the hands of the universe in some sense, because you kind of hope that something like the Trump thing would be that trigger and it would have worked, and it kind of would have worked already in a sense, better than it has. I mean, it's always up relative to ETH, but it is always up relative to ETH. So like you would have hoped that it was a bit, the immediate trigger was a bit larger than it was right now, but like something similar to that can still happen and is still on the card. So that's where you get like a very positive feedback loop. And that's why the upside to me exists, because the market participants aren't crazy like this type at the moment relative to what they have been in the past.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to parse, and maybe what you guys like, or what Ricardo is describing is simply kind of like putting yourself in the shoes of kind of one of these institutionals who have been sitting on something that's like relatively flat, you know, over the period, who front ran a long time ago. They might be looking at this as like, we missed a lot of the gains. If we now kind of rotate to something else very aggressively, and then the market dumps, we just look like idiots, and so on. So there's kind of like this clash between like, yes, this is very positive, but at the same time, a lot of profit taking, preventing it from pushing up. but then it always comes back to this question of like, if not this, then what? Like we got, Google numbers on a Web3 wallet. Something went from 0 to 70 billion in a day. That can be seen as like, okay, that's quite attractive. A lot of people are going to try to do that, which I think is a negative about this. There's going to be a lot of grift coming in, unfortunately. But at the same time, it's like, can anyone else on the planet do that? I suspect not.
No.
And so then you're almost betting on like, and these are meme coins. So we do need to keep that in perspective. There's other things that pull people in, but certainly meme coins in this cycle have been the thing that pulls in the most people in some sense. And if no one else can do that, then you're like expecting some kind of more grassroots type thing, which just happens on a huge scale. Maybe this introduced the concept of meme coins to millions of people. I don't know what that would be. But are these effects going to be reflected in kind of the asset value of Sol or ETH or anything else? I don't know.
And again, I'm not sure. I'm not even waiting for retail here. Right? Retail is not going to move the market in a way that is relevant. And they're going to move the small stuff. They're not going to move the real stuff. The real thing we should be wondering about is, well, first of all, signs of actual retail activity, which is like why I keep looking at the smaller stuff that they might end up moving. But also at which point may this latecomers, people who regret holding way too much ETH might start getting into it. That I find a lot more interesting question than what is going to draw in retail in the next, I don't know, 4 weeks or what have you.
It's also worth noting that, like, if you're talking about institutional demand and them moving prices, institutions FOMO just like retail. It's just like FOMO in a different way.
Yeah. This is what I mean by being pessimistic about the rationality of institutions.
Yeah. So, like if the market is just kind of stays the way it has been, which is generally in a positive direction, like there is, a positive path there. But yeah, it's kind of hard to say, and I don't think it's difficult to find, in a sense, new things to say. But this does feel like maybe like a good question to ask is, how does this moment feel similar or different to, because BTC was in the 60K range for a very, very long time, like 8 months. And now we're in this range for like 3 months. I guess, yeah, kind of what do you see as the difference? And like, were you as kind of on the scale of whether or not this goes up anymore in this quote unquote cycle, as worried at that point as you are at this point? Maybe that's like a green.
Okay, first of all, define this range, because we haven't been, like, BTC hasn't been in this range for 3 months. BTC has been here since like early December, maybe. So it's
yeah. Optimistically, if you look at the chart, maybe November, but sure, not that long. Yeah.
Okay, so for starters, I'm not pessimistic here. I mean, we have the advantage. I expect everybody here has the advantage of not having bought in at like 235 over the weekend. So I'm not particularly concerned about this. What I'm trying to figure out is exactly how to feel about this particular movement. And I actually think that I just hit on the, I think that I just hit on the, on how I would describe this. I wouldn't say, Teemu, that this was an ad for crypto. I think I would say that this was a massive showpiece for Solana. That's what it was. This is not a specific crypto thing. I think that for crypto as a whole, it's a lot more important the moves that we're being seen on the SEC.
But it's both. It has to be both.
Okay, maybe, but I don't know. Maybe
it's an ad for crypto, but then when somebody onboards to get involved, they're on Solana.
Yeah, I would say that both of these perspectives are true in the sense that this is probably when you get a general crypto ad, I think this leans toward like the Solana ad side relative to kind of what the average thing is, which is a crypto ad in a way. If that makes sense. Just because of like phantom wallet.
Maybe the thing is that what I'm thinking separately of this about the SEC stuff is because, okay, the SEC stuff would, if I were running like a large institution, the changes at the SEC would look more like they're de-risking the space.
Retail doesn't give a shit about the SEC.
I know, that's when I'm talking institutions.
But institutions are bought in.
I'm not entirely sure that all institutions are bought in. I am pretty sure there are large swaths, at the very least, in the European Union who are very conservatively looking at, is this going to bite me at some point? I mean, you yourself were saying like a few calls ago that Finnish pension funds are going to be the last ones to come into anything like this. I would expect
2045 or so, something like that.
Point is, I would expect there are large swaths of things that you would consider institutions that are still holding out and making sure that this is not going to bite them, right? Like even investing in Coinbase shares is not going to bite them.
Yeah. Should we just give some like totally not financial advice, and nobody should trade based on what we say, but just some predictions so we can, like, on the next call we can loop back and see what happened, because I think, as Mika said, the next weeks are crucial, right? Like, it's, if we just make a prediction on what happens, it'll be interesting to see how it actually goes. I can start. I think Solana outperforms relative to the other ones in the next few weeks. And then when there's like the next kind of more organic wave up, I think Solana takes kind of like a much bigger bite of that than most of the other chains. And so like you have this natural kind of risk off right now, but Solana is like holding, and then it's just a matter of like it starts to creep up, because we do, like, I think what Mika was describing regarding the feedback loop, that the virtual cycle that might be created, I think people will try to front run that. And so I would assume, again, like, I think this would be rational, that institutions start putting on Solana exposure, because, like, out of all the assets right now, the one that you would most expect to have a massive run up would be Solana. Yeah. And so, like, I'm not saying that people, you know, sell all their other assets and go into Solana, but certainly everyone who's paying attention will have it in their mind that, like, that might happen, and they would want exposure to that, which would then lead to this relative improvement in performance, and then maybe a more exuberance at some point. So that's my prediction. I'll caveat that with one more thing, though. I think it's possible that there's not that much more to go up. So if you, like, it seems to me like kind of the marginal buyer, and it goes back to what I was saying about front running in too big of a size. I think the price is now, like, the marginal buyer is just not here. There's some, but, like, there's not enough to push markets up like considerably. These, you know, like, strategic reserves could make a massive difference. I don't think they're happening in the next year. I don't think they're happening in the next 3 years. Like, it's going to take a while. The announcements might be a little bump, but that's about it. And I don't see like the additional demand coming from anywhere. So I think there's like obviously volatility in both ways, and I think, as said, Solana will probably outperform, but I don't think there's that much more upwards to go. Now, this could be wrong, but if you also if you kind of discount the percentage increases from past cycles with something, so there's a natural discount based simply on size. So every cycle, generally, the percentage increase is a little bit smaller, and then you add in some discount for positive interest rates. With some very like napkin-y math, you get to figures that are sort of in this range. And so this might just be slightly more muted, and then we kind of correct, sort of normalize our pricing, and then in the next cycle we also normalize the amount of front running. And I think that's broadly a good thing, and we've discussed this a little bit separately, and we don't need to. We can maybe do a separate episode on like what will future cycles potentially look like, because I think that's an interesting question in and of itself. But that would be my my prediction. Solana outperforms, has a bigger run up than the others, but in general, kind of the cap is relatively muted. And then we go from there.
What would you define as relatively muted?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing. What would be like the number of BTC price that would say like that wasn't muted?
Yeah, like for instance, a little bit ago you mentioned that wouldn't be outrageous to think it 2x's, right?
Yeah. So I think that's directionally correct. Like, I don't want to put a specific price on it because I have no idea, but like Solana could do a 2x, and I think that's sort of like easy to rationalize. Like I don't think it reaches Ethereum because it just doesn't have the same amount of kind of holders that just like all these old assets just have holders who like they're not even paying attention. They don't even know where their crypto wallets are anymore. Like they have just this sort of latent, like the circulating supply is actually a lot smaller basically than
The practical circulating supply.
Yeah.
Okay,
and then you have that. So I don't think it reaches Ethereum. I think these things generally, I think history has proven that Lindy is like surprisingly powerful in crypto. But I do think like if you look at kind of the charts, like a very reasonable thing to compare, like it would make total sense to me for people to be like, well, this should be at least what XRP is in FDV. Like that would make a lot of sense. Like it's the clear winner of this cycle, is pushing it to within 150 billion FDV of Ethereum. Like wouldn't that kind of make sense? Especially now that Ethereum is kind of scrambling, and we can maybe touch on that really briefly after we get your predictions, but that would sort of broadly make sense. But that's also pretty muted, like it's from Solana bottom, it's a lot, but assuming that Bitcoin isn't doing 2x, Bitcoin in this case might be doing 20%. And so on. So I think like it's not muted necessarily so much in terms of Solana, but muted in terms of like the market.
One of the weirdest intricacies of this market historically has been how rarely things really flip in each other. It's like almost weird. It's almost
that's what I mean.
Some weird anchoring effect due to the fact that these things haven't really pushed themselves to mainstream that is super, super strange. And people have been making predictions on flipping of various assets over the years, and those never have played out. I'll say if those ever do play out, that'll at least be a new interesting moment in the market for me to observe. Because if it feels like, okay, Sol can beat ETH, like really beat it, like that moment in the market, I'm not even saying that I hope like Sol is better than ETH or whatever, but I just want to see that kind of thing happen in this market one day, and that would be very interesting. I would say my prediction, if the range right now is like 92K to 106 on the charts for the past couple of months, I'll say it breaks up. And the kind of thinking for me in that prediction is that I can't give you necessarily the exact thing on the market which makes it happen. Maybe it already did. Maybe the Trump thing, like kind of the effects on the market will be seen later on. But as a cycle top, like BTC funding rates are below neutral at the moment. Like this has never happened before that we top out in like kind of this fashion. So all the market structure things, just like if you believe in the 4-year cycles, the way it's gone previously in any way, if you look at kind of, and I get that the price has been front run this time, maybe a bit more than it ever has been, but like there is no exuberance. So the bet is like, will there be one or not? And historically there has been, so I'm just going to go with it's going to be there again. It's not really a very, very great analytical framework, but I would say like it's quite incredible if we top out at above 100K BTC with below neutral funding rates and like no cost of leverage in these systems and no leverage to be seen anywhere in these systems. Like that to me is an incredible fact if that happens. And on it, like not incredible intellectually, but incredible historically.
Yeah, that's fair. I agree with both. And you took the one that I was going to take short term. Obviously, you know, if BTC and its SOL are going to continue sliding, I expect. I'm not sure what time frame this is happening. I do expect that at some point in the US, they're just going to get a stake ETH and not too far in the future, a stake ETH ETF, not too far in the future. I expect that it's going to have slide so much at that point that Ethereum people are going to go nuts and shout it from the rooftop. So they're going to get a pretty nice green candle that is still going to look miserable compared to a slide, but that's likely going to get mercilessly sold into. So that would be my expectation on the ETH side, particularly considering all the issues with leadership and focus that we have been seeing that sadly we don't have enough time to get into on this one. The other thing that I would expect, I don't know about the strategic reserve thing in the US and if that is like to happen or when, but I do expect that we are going to start seeing more news about BTC reserves from large institutions in what I described in one call as countries the IMF doesn't get to look down at. Right, we're starting to hear some of that from Italy recently. That's still in the countries that the IMF kind of like feels iffy about and wrinkles their nose at, but they're Eurozone, so don't get too much. I suspect we're going to start seeing more and more of that. I don't think this is gonna, and these things need to go out. I don't think this is going to start from like the top of a country the way that it is in El Salvador. We have to be like a really small place.
Can I ask you a question regarding that?
I was going to ask a question.
If you were you know, on top of a corporate treasury or whatever institution in like a Western country, I guess, or like a non-IMF not under IMF thumb country, would you purchase crypto in these current
okay, I'm not sure about government because I've never had to make a decision while being on the government side. On a company side, yeah, I probably would. Like large company treasury, you have a lot of unused cash. You can figure out how much your usual losses have been in a year that didn't go that well. And say, I don't know, you lost 100 million on that year. Then you just put 5% of that into BTC and just 5% of that amount. And you figure like, look, guys, this can act as a hedge in case we have another bad year. So,
but but now, would you do it now?
I would start dollar cost averaging right now. Yes, I would not ape.
Okay.
Okay, another question. The Bitcoin Strategic Reserve is trading at 29% on buy market for the next 100 days. Are you short or long that market?
100 days. How does it get resolved? If there's an announcement or if they actually buy BTC?
Confiscated BTC doesn't count. So there has to be a buy within the next 100 days for it.
30%. 30% is not bad. I would long that at 30%.
Then short long.
Short long on
Being a buy from the US government that they say is going towards the strategic reserve in the next 100 days.
oh, like no.
Short opinion.
Interest.
No, I mean,
to me, the thing is,
I wouldn't do shit. I wouldn't bet on that market in general because going short on that market isn't enough upside.
Yeah,
the market is accurate, I think.
I'm forcing you to do.
go into your head, take a position.
So you know what will happen though? World Liberty Financial or whatever Trump's thing is gonna buy all kinds of shit.
Oh, they're definitely going to front run whatever thing the US government does.
Yeah,
But
they front run their own flows. That's an argument that they're going to buy, which is they're front running their own flows.
Yeah. The main reason why I wouldn't mind taking that bet at gun to my head, I wouldn't mind taking the bet at 30%, is because if it is any purchase of Bitcoin that they get to say that, right? You could spend 100K and make the announcement, and this keeps.
But getting the government to do even that, I think, is a long road. But I could be
at 30% on a guy that doesn't seem to gives a rat's ass about proper procedure. I would long that.
Okay, let me ask you guys a question. Why would they do it now and not wait for a bear market?
Because waiting for a bear market is a rational decision, and making a single BTC purchase in the next 100 days keeps all the crypto donors and people who have been yapping in their ears about it happy.
Yeah, I think that would be my argument as well. They're not really long-term thinkers necessarily here, and the short-term play is to keep the thing that has brought you a lot of momentum going on.
That's true. If they let crypto crash, they lose a lot of, like, they basically lose money directly because a lot of that money is getting funneled into their hands in different ways.
And the crypto owners that put a lot of people in Congress might not come back the next time around. So.
Okay, let me just
really resolve.
Let me just wrap this up. So the hypothesis we're going to end this episode on is that the U.S. government is now in charge of pump and dumping Bitcoin.
I don't entirely think that's a hypothesis. I think we have a few points on that.
I think we're already there.
But then, as a closing thought,
that's the interpretation. It's not a hypothesis. It's an interpretation with the current available data.
Well, I will echo the sentiment that I tweeted about the other day, which is back in 2012 when we were kind of imagining, governments getting involved one day in crypto. We weren't imagining this. Of course, we maybe should have imagined this because there is a very realistic view, which basically says that the whole monetary system is like the same thing. This is how all of finance works. It's just wrapped in this veneer of legitimacy, but it fundamentally functions in a very similar way. Anyway, so there you have it. I don't know if we've educated anyone on anything in this podcast, but that's as it should be. So thank you everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Ta-ta.